Hello my dear subscribers, I'm pleased to welcome you to my YouTube channel dedicated to author stories. Enjoy listening.
The sun was shining brightly through the thin curtains, making Naomi squint. As much as she didn't want to admit it to herself, morning had come and it was time to wake up. She glanced at her sleeping husband beside her, brushed the hair away from her face to get a better look at him. Admiring him, struggling with the desire to wake him up, hug him, and kiss him. Peter was sleeping soundly, his breath slow and deep. I wonder what he's dreaming about. Naomi thought, brushing away the stubborn hair again. They always got tangled and bothered her at the most inconvenient moments. And now it was such a beautiful morning, such a wonderful mood. Her beloved was lying next to her, and their child in the neighboring room had not yet woken up, judging by the absence of the sound of little feet running around. Naomi stretched quietly and sat up on the bed, reaching for her silk robe and putting it on her shoulders. Judging by what was happening outside the window, spring had truly arrived. Water was dripping from the roofs, birds were singing, and the sun was shining boldly through the windows, hinting that it would soon be warm. Naomi got up from the bed and pulled the curtains tighter to make sure the extra sun ray wouldn't disturb her dear husband's sleep. Naomi turned her back to the window and looked at Peter again. He was sleeping on his back with his arms spread to the sides. His right hand twitched slightly in his sleep, and Naomi smiled, noticing it. For some reason, she remembered how in the early days of their married life, Peter often came home in the early hours of the morning, drunk and excited. He wanted to talk, argue, basically turn the whole house upside down, announcing his return. Naomi smiled, recalling her reaction to his escapades back then. She cried, threw dishes, yelled at him. They even had fights sometimes. Naomi had tried several times to leave her husband, tired of his endless night outings with friends, unanswered calls on his phone, his bad habit of forgetting what day it was and what it meant for their family. At that time, all of this seemed like a real catastrophe to the newlywed wife, and Naomi was deeply upset about being disappointed in married life so soon. The woman was distracted from her memories and adjusted the blanket that had slipped onto the floor, which she used to keep warm at night. Despite the temperatures being above freezing outside and having heating in the house, she always remained sensitive to the cold and couldn't sleep peacefully without 2 or 3 layers of warm blankets on top. It was even better to snuggle up to her warm husband and sleep even more soundly. Naomi put on her warm slippers and walked into the living room, carefully closing the door to the bedroom behind her. On her way to the kitchen, where she planned to have her long-awaited and now ritualistic cup of strong hot coffee, she peeked into her son's room and made sure that he was still asleep. On weekends, he usually woke up before 9 a.m., but it was already 9:45 on the clock. So it was surprising that William was still sleeping. Probably the last week at school preparing for International Women's Day celebration took its toll on him. He played the lead role in the concert dedicated to girls. He was very nervous and anxious, so he must be tired. Now he deserved some rest, and his long sleep didn't surprise Naomi at all, who took the opportunity to head to the kitchen and closed the door behind her. The coffee machine was too loud, and the woman risked waking up the whole family while making herself just 1 cup of coffee. Stretching herself again, Naomi settled into the comfortable kitchen chair that she had chosen to match the wallpaper and tiles. When they were renovating the apartment, it seemed to her that another wave of conflicts with her husband had come. But she survived this difficult renovation period without any losses or divorce. Naomi even smiled, remembering how she herself personally smashed the tiles of the wrong shade. She recalled how her husband had looked at her with huge astonished eyes, seeing her dissatisfaction. And yet, at that time, Naomi was 7 months pregnant, so Peter couldn't even say a word against her, although his face turned red. He barely restrained himself from raising his voice at his wife or throwing all 3 boxes of tiles from the 4th floor. Naomi lightly touched the cool tile with her fingers and admired its pleasant shade, the one she had dreamed of during her pregnancy, going from store to store in search of exactly the right color she needed. For years had passed since then. Perhaps it was time to consider updating the apartment or even changing to a new one. Her coffee was ready, and she took the first sip with pleasure, closing her eyes and savoring the taste. She had also won the coffee machine from her husband, a staunch advocate of a healthy lifestyle who believed that coffee was harmful to the body. Naomi had argued with him passionately at the time, and then a week later, she accidentally saw her husband in a coffee shop with another woman. They were sitting at a table near the large window, and her Peter, who had insisted to Naomi that coffee was bad for her, was sitting next to some fancy-looking person, sipping coffee. That's when Naomi rushed into the coffee shop at breakneck speed, barely stopping herself from sprawling on the floor and grabbing onto the table of another family at the last moment. All the coffee shop customers looked at the enraged woman who was heading towards the table where her husband's expression changed as she approached. Naomi tried to stay calm. She even regulated her breathing to greet the couple as expressively as possible. "Enjoy your coffee. Peter, care to introduce me to your companion?" Naomi's mind was filled with the most unpleasant fantasies at that moment. It's been exactly a year since William was born, and of course, Naomi hasn't fully regained her pre-pregnancy shape yet. She noticed that her husband has been paying her less attention lately, and what really threw her off balance was seeing him sharing coffee with some unfamiliar woman who, by the way, looked quite attractive compared to Naomi. This stirred up a new wave of hormones in recently given birth Tatiana, completely overwhelming her. And what was most hurtful was that her husband, who had been boasting about the harmful effects of coffee, was casually drinking it in the company of this woman. Naomi stood next to the couple and looked at them alternately, waiting for any comments. Peter stood up and tried to calm his wife with a hand gesture, but Naomi was already on edge, ready to pour the contents of his cup over his head. "Naomi, honey, calm down. This is Nina, my boss. I've told you about her before. We just stopped by the coffee shop on our way to the client because we have plenty of time before the meeting, and it's chilly outside," Peter said, lowering his head and smiling. "Fine," Naomi pursed her lips. "And what about the coffee?" "It's not coffee, it's black tea," Peter replied with a smile. "You know I don't like or drink coffee." Naomi felt like a complete fool, as all the patrons of the establishment were now looking at her, with Nina, her husband's boss, showing a particular interest. Nina, whose approval Peter's career and their family's financial well-being depended on. Naomi grimaced, remembering this story. She had imagined so many things to herself as she ran along the coffee shop and approached their table. Now that 3-year-old story seemed so absurd, as Nina turned out to be a perfectly reasonable leader who helped Peter become the head of the department. Years passed, and the dynamics in their family changed, just as they themselves changed. Pondering about it, Naomi absent-mindedly glanced at her reflection in the mirror that was installed on the refrigerator. Even though it had been more than 7 years since they got married, she didn't look worse and she didn't love her husband any less. She also really wanted a second child, but Peter was against it for now. But that's okay, she could approach it like dealing with a coffee machine, unexpectedly in her favor. "Mama." William's voice echoed from the bedroom. And Naomi, leaving her unfinished coffee behind, went to her son's room. He was already awake and quickly told her about his dream. Something about toy cars that suddenly came to life. About a boy from the neighboring group who broke his bicycle. Naomi hugged her son and patiently explained to him that it was just a dream. Dreams weren't real, they were just fantasies. After William woke up, Naomi had to start preparing breakfast. They had a weekend tradition in their family. On Saturdays, Naomi made cottage cheese pancakes, and on Sundays, it was pancakes. So, right after their morning routine of washing up, William sat on his high stool and watched his mom make delicious cottage cheese pancakes with vanilla and raisins, which they would later dip in condensed milk or sour cream. But condensed milk was better, it was sweeter. Peter woke up from the pleasant smell of fried pancakes that wafted through the entire apartment and finally reached his nose. He stretched lazily on the bed and thought that he could sleep for another half an hour or even an hour. But no, it wouldn't work today, because he and Naomi had promised to visit his parents outside the city to bring them groceries and celebrate the anniversary of their first date last week. Peter didn't like dates, he always forgot about them. He believed that one should keep truly important information in their head, not just dates of acquaintances, weddings, first dates, or kisses. He didn't even always remember his own birthday on the first try. That was his quirk that annoyed others, especially his wife. Peter loved his wife, he respected her, but he knew that they were completely different and connected only by one thing: their love, as long as it still lived in their hearts. And their shared child. For some reason, Peter didn't believe in the infinity of any relationships. Before Naomi, he easily started and ended romances without thinking about the feelings of the women he left behind. How did it happen that Naomi stayed by his side and has been with him for over 7 years? It wasn't about love or attachment, but about her patience, which always amazed emotional Peter. It was not in his nature to tolerate anything that caused discomfort or inconvenience. As soon as he started feeling uncomfortable with a woman, feeling suffocated by her jealousy and desire to possess him completely, Peter would immediately leave. But Naomi, despite her jealousy, was also forgiving and patient. And how could we not mention Peter's own behavior traits? He never gave his wife the slightest reason for real jealousy. Although in the early days of their marriage, he went out with his still single friends to bars and restaurants, he never crossed the line of fidelity. Although there were a million opportunities. Peter believed that you either live with a person or break up. And he wanted to live with Naomi, so he tried to accommodate her wishes, including in the choice of tiles and coffee maker. Peter sat up in bed and greeted his wife with a smile as she entered the bedroom with a small breakfast table. On it, there was a stack of pancakes and a cup of fragrant mint tea, just the way he liked it. And this was also their weekend tradition. Of course, on days when Naomi was upset with her husband's behavior, she would ignore such grand gestures. But if she was in a good mood, she would definitely spoil her man. Following Naomi, William entered the room with lips smeared with condensed milk. "Dad, these pancakes are awesome," he exclaimed. Naomi laughed and gently pushed her son away. "Be careful, Dad's tea is hot. He might burn himself or you. It will leave a wound, and it will hurt," she warned. "Like when I fell off my bike and scraped my knee?" William asked, moving further away from the steaming cup. "Exactly like that, or even worse," replied Mom in a stern voice, and the boy quickly left the room to be at a safe distance from the potentially dangerous object. "Is it delicious?" Naomi asked with a loving smile, sitting down next to Peter on the bed. "Always," Peter replied, and they shared a tender moment together, enjoying their special weekend tradition. He smiled and lightly touched her hand with his own. This gesture was so intimate, known only to the two of them. Many years ago, their relationship had begun with this very gesture, and the story of their love had begun. After breakfast, Peter went into the kitchen, stretched again, and looked out the window. His attention was drawn to the window across from him. Just yesterday, he had noticed a little girl who was always waving at him. "Hey, remember I told you about that strange girl in the window yesterday?" Peter pointed to the window opposite him. "I remember. Is she waving at you again?" "Yeah. It's kind of strange." "Well, maybe she's just bored and waving at you. It's like she's calling me over to her." I can imagine the scene. You'll go over to her and tell her she called you. What will her parents think? Yeah, you're right. I'm probably just making up nonsense. Peter quickly pulled down the curtain and went to take a shower. Today, they were going to visit Peter's parents. William was running around the house at breakneck speed. He loved these trips to Grandma's house. Unfortunately, such trips didn't happen as often as the child would like. Naomi washed all the dishes after breakfast and went to her room to change. She stood in front of the closet and couldn't decide what to wear for the day. Her gaze fell on a red dress with bare shoulders. Maybe not, too revealing, Naomi muttered. She rummaged through the closet for a while and finally found a suitable outfit. It was a gray knee-length dress. Peter, I'm ready, Naomi said. I am too, William shouted a little quieter. Well, then let's go to the store and hit the road. They went out to the yard. It was slushy outside, with streams of water running along the road. William started jumping over puddles. William, go to the car before your feet get wet, Mom said sternly. The child obediently went to the car. They spent about an hour at the store, trying to buy everything they needed. But soon their cart was full. After paying for their purchases, they drove to the village. The roads had already thawed, with dirty snow splattered on the sides. A few more days of warm weather and there would be no snow left. They were eagerly awaited in the village, as Peter's mom had prepared various dishes that made their mouths water. It was clear that no one would leave hungry. Peter happily ran around the yard. Surprisingly, there was still a lot of snow in the village, and it wasn't as warm as in the city. All right, William, let's go to the table, then you can run around, Mom said. The feast lasted long and was filled with joy. Naomi loved the atmosphere at her parents' house, where she was greatly loved. They returned home late in the evening. We ate so much, Peter said heavily. Yeah, it's been a while since we've eaten like that. Naomi went to put the child to bed, and Peter stayed in the kitchen. He brewed himself a cup of strong tea and sat on the windowsill. He liked admiring the city at night. His attention was drawn to the same girl waving her hands. What's going on there? What if something happened? He felt scared at the images that popped up in his head. At that moment, his wife returned. William fell asleep within minutes. He was so tired. That's good. What are you thinking about? Naomi hugged her husband around the waist and rested her head on his shoulder. They stood together in the dark kitchen. She's waving at me again. I don't understand what she wants. Maybe something happened there? I've been thinking the same thing. They looked out the window, but the girl was gone. We should go there. Tomorrow morning, of course. You might be right. They went to sleep. Sleep didn't take long to come after leaving the village. Peter had terrible nightmares during the night, which he had made up himself. He dreamt that he came to the little girl and there was something horrible there. He woke up several times. Morning came, and he woke up feeling exhausted. His head hurt, and it was evident that he had woken up frequently during the night. Breakfast was already on the table. The pancakes were delicious. Finishing his tea, he approached the window. The girl was waving at him, calling him. I've had enough of this. I'll go and talk to her parents. She's starting to scare me. I was in the kitchen at night, and she was waving at me too. What does she want from me? I don't understand anymore. Peter said anxiously. Just a quick trip, I'm scared, he added. Peter put on his jacket and went to the house across the street. In his head, he was planning the layout of the third floor to make sure he went to the right apartment. He was lucky, the stairwell was laid out the same as theirs. He rang the doorbell, and he could hear someone rushing and coming to the door. It was audible that they were struggling to open the door from the other side. Someone was crying. "Why are you crying? Open the door," Peter said. He didn't get a response. Peter rang the doorbell of the apartment across the hall. The door was opened by an elderly grandmother who was struggling to move her legs. "Grandma, who lives in that apartment of yours?" "Well, there's a woman living there, but she's always out, hardly ever at home." "What did you want?" "There's a child in the apartment." "Don't make things up. Her daughter is mute. She's been living in a children's home for a long time." "Would they really leave such a little girl alone?" "I saw her at the window. She's there." "Well, I don't know. She hasn't been there for 4 days, and it's been quiet in the apartment." "Do you have the keys?" "No, the caretaker of the building has them. He lives downstairs." The man quickly ran downstairs. He explained the situation and got the keys from the caretaker, who went with him. He had no other choice. But what if he's a thief and he's taking something from the apartment? They opened the door and went in. The man was stunned by what he saw. There was a thin girl sitting on the couch, crying. She looked about 6 years old. The house was a mess. There were bottles and dishes scattered in the kitchen, and there was a pot with huge mold on the stove. "Oh my God, what's going on here?" said the old man who came with Peter. "How could no one hear that there's a girl alone in the apartment?" Peter was very angry. "But it was quiet here, and she can't speak. If she could, we would have come to help." The man stood and looked at the girl. He just couldn't move from what he saw. Horrible thoughts were swirling in his head. He couldn't understand how this could happen. It turned out that her mother had simply locked her at home and went out for a walk. She didn't even leave her any food. Peter was shocked. The girl didn't know how to use the stove. She ate whatever was in the refrigerator. That's what the mess around the refrigerator indicated. "You should have knocked on the door, girl. Someone would have heard you." "Smashed dishes, tried to scream. You waved to me, but I didn't understand your gestures. I thought you were just playing around. I even wanted to scold your parents for not taking care of you," Peter said with regret. "So, what should we do?" "By the way, her name is Catherine," the old man asked. "I'll take her in for now while things get sorted out." "Should we call the police?" The old man was completely bewildered. "I'll call them myself. You've already done enough. There are so many people living in this building, and no one heard that a child was dying of hunger in a locked apartment. The girl is actually nice, just always hungry. She's been taken to the children's home so many times, but she always runs back home. She misses home, apparently." The old man stood with his head down. He understood that he was partly to blame for this. The little girl hugged her teddy bear tightly, which had seen better days. The man quickly dressed the girl and they set off. The girl was very thin, barely able to move her little legs. In a few minutes, they were at the doorstep of their home. "Peter, who is this? Who is the girl? You won't believe what's inside that apartment. Hurry up and feed the child." Peter began to take off the girl's coat. The girl was very shy. She sat cautiously at the table, but she quickly devoured the pancakes. "I went in there, and it was a mess, as if there had been a war. The neighbors said her mother is always out and forgets her daughter at home. Recently, the child was taken away. It's unclear how she ended up back in the apartment. You can't imagine what it's like in there." Peter couldn't tell everything at once. He was overwhelmed with anger and emotions. "Ask her." Naomi looked at the girl. "She's mute. That's what the neighbors told me. But she hears and understands everything." Now, what do we do? Naomi sighed. Oh, how pitiful the child is. I left my phone number in the kitchen of that apartment and wrote that the girl is with us. If the mother comes back, she'll call. But we can't leave the child with such a mother. We need to call the police. Let the child welfare center take care of her, it'll be better. At that moment, the girl ran up to Naomi and hugged her legs. There were tears in her eyes. She didn't want to go to a child welfare center. It was clear even without words. It's okay, little girl, we won't harm you, Naomi said softly. The day passed quickly. Naomi decided to wait for the girl's mother and then figure out what to do. She bathed the girl, changed her into clean clothes. Despite being older than their son, she was only slightly taller than him. In the evening, after putting everyone to bed, she went to the kitchen where her husband was watching TV. Peter, I feel so sorry for her. We can't send her to an orphanage, she will have a hard time there. I understand, but we can't keep her with us either. It would be a crime. I wonder why she doesn't speak. It would be helpful to know something about her. We'll wait. Sooner or later her mother will come and everything will be clarified. They went to bed. Naomi couldn't sleep for a long time. She was worried. She was very concerned about the little girl. But the morning started with a knock on the door. There stood a woman who looked more like a homeless person than a respectable one. It became clear that she was the girl's mother. That's how Peter imagined her. She was dressed in rags and smelled unpleasantly, which greatly disturbed the man. "Where's my daughter?" she asked sharply. Peter was surprised that she didn't even say hello. "Hello. It seems to me that you forgot to say hello. Who do you think you are to blame me for something? Catherine, get ready to go home. Look at you, going around visiting like crazy. Who invited you here? I told you to wait for me at home." "Wait at home? You've been gone for 4 days." She was hungry there. "Not hungry, there was plenty of food there." "Can you stop lying? I was at your apartment." Peter was getting angry. "Don't shout at me. I know how to raise my own daughter," the woman said sharply. The little girl hid behind Naomi. Naomi realized that the girl didn't want to go with her mother. She looked at her and noticed that the girl was trembling and very scared. "Wait," said Naomi. "We won't let you have the child. You've brought her to such a state that it's terrifying. We'll call the police now and let them deal with you." "Call whoever you want," the mother of the girl said calmly. She simply turned around and went home, no longer needing the child. She walked calmly, without hurrying. The police arrived quickly. Peter told them everything as it happened. "She's been deprived of her rights for a long time, but the girl sometimes runs away from the foster home. It's hard for her there." "And what will happen to her now?" Naomi asked. "Foster home, I don't see any other options. Maybe someone will adopt her someday, but it's unlikely anyone wants a mute girl." Catherine was taken away. Peter and Naomi were very upset. They had come to love this girl in just one day. She had big eyes that spoke for her. "Maybe I'll say something silly now, but we should adopt her." "Are you serious? You didn't want another child." "I don't understand myself, but I feel so sorry for her." Quickly getting ready, they went to the child welfare agency. There they learned about this girl. She wasn't always mute. It all happened when her father had an accident. Previously, it was a good family. And the mother, who was her stepmother, who had officially taken on guardianship, couldn't cope and the child was taken away. The process of adoption took a very long time, and Peter wanted the girl to become a part of their family as soon as possible. but it was an agonizingly lengthy procedure. Finally, it was done. Now the girl is a member of their family. They went to get her as a whole family. Catherine was very happy with the news, and it was clear that the girl was happy too. They went back home where a room was already prepared for her. Since then, Catherine has been living in a complete family. She learned easily and soon learned how to write, and after 2 years, she started speaking. Of course, it was all thanks to Naomi, who constantly took her to doctors. Many shrugged their shoulders, saying that she just didn't want to speak and it was something nerve-related. But one fine day, she called Naomi Mom and then called Peter Dad. It was a great happiness for this family. William quickly found common ground with her, and they played together all the time. A year later, Naomi got pregnant. She didn't wait for an answer from her husband whether he was ready or not. It happened spontaneously, which pleased her husband. Soon, Naomi will be a mother of many children. Peter started looking for a big house. A family of this size needs a lot of space, and he understands it perfectly. Now he is a happy father. They treat Catherine as their own. He never regrets that he finally decided to go to the girl who called him from the window of the neighboring house.